The snow fell thick and fast on Christmas Eve, blanketing the small town of Pine Hollow in a serene but almost unnatural silence. Sarah Thompson hurried through the deserted streets, clutching her coat tighter against the biting wind. She had stayed late at work, hoping to wrap things up before the holidays, and now she just wanted to be safe in her warm home with her family. But tonight felt strange. The air felt heavy, almost thick with something she couldn't quite place. As she approached her house, a shiver ran down her spine. The familiar warmth of her family's Christmas decorations glowed softly through the window, yet there was an odd flicker to it, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and dance in her peripheral vision. And then she noticed something even more disturbing. The front door was slightly ajar, swaying with the breeze. Sarah hesitated, her instincts telling her something was very wrong. Swallowing her fear, she pushed it open cautiously, calling out, "Mom? Dad?" But silence greeted her. The living room looked untouched at first, with ornaments hung precisely and stockings neatly over the fireplace, but an unnatural chill hung in the air, penetrating her down to the bone. She moved cautiously toward the staircase, each step creaking in the silence. Just then, a soft melody began to play, a haunting, melancholy carol that echoed through the house. It was a song she didn't recognize, something older, slower, like a hymn from another era. Her breath caught as she realized it seemed to be coming from upstairs. Slowly she climbed, each step making her heartbeat thunder louder. She reached the top to find a group of shadowy figures gathered in the hallway. They were dressed in Victorian-era clothing with lace collars, high-necked blouses, and faded coats. Their skin was pale, their faces hollow, and their eyes, oh, their eyes, stared straight through her, as though she were the ghost. The carolers turned in unison, their voices growing louder and more insistent, a chilling harmony echoing through the hall. "Join us!" they chorused, reaching out with translucent hands, their voices like whispers carried by the wind. Panic surged through Sarah as she backed away, tripping over her own feet in her desperation. She turned to run but found the staircase had vanished. All that remained was an endless corridor stretching into darkness, and the only way forward was past the carolers. Desperate, Sarah backed into the wall, feeling it ice cold under her fingers. The figures advanced, their hands outstretched, faces etched with an expression she couldn't decipher. Was it sadness, longing, anger? Their song grew louder, as if they were calling for something ancient, something sacred. Just as her vision began to blur with panic, she heard a familiar voice echo from the darkness. "Sarah, it's me, Dad." She turned, and there he was, her father, holding a lantern that cast a warm, reassuring light. The ghostly figures recoiled at the glow, their forms flickering and fading. Her father pulled her into an embrace, whispering, "They're trapped, Sarah. They're bound to this house, trying to fulfill a Christmas wish they never completed." Together they moved down the hall, her father's lantern keeping the ghosts at bay. When they reached the end, he showed her an old music box tucked away in a cabinet. "Their song," he said, "is unfinished." They wound it up, and the tune, an ancient, beautiful carol, filled the hallway. The spirits' faces softened, and one by one they disappeared, leaving only a soft echo of their haunting melody. As they returned downstairs, Sarah looked back up the staircase. The house seemed normal again, but she couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in Pine Hollow the silent carolers would return. The next morning, they found a forgotten ornament on the doorstep, an antique glass angel that shimmered with a faint, otherworldly glow. Every Christmas afterward, Sarah would hang it on their tree, remembering the silent carolers who once sang for peace. Every Christmas, Emily Rivera cherished decorating the ancient ornament passed down through her family, a tradition as old as the tales her grandmother told by the fire. The ornament, a delicate glass angel, always took the place of honor on top of the tree, and they called it the Guardian. This year, however, Emily stumbled upon a second ornament she'd never seen before, tucked away in the attic. It was another angel, but this one had wings that shimmered with an unnatural gleam, as though hiding something sinister within its glassy depths. The night she hung it on the tree, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. She tried to dismiss it as Christmas jitters, but her unease grew as the night went on. And that night, her dreams were filled with visions of a winter landscape stretching empty and cold, where the angels stood alone, watching her with eyes that seemed far too human. The following day, strange things began to happen around the house. She'd set down a mug of cocoa, only to find it move to the other side of the room when she looked away. The family cat, normally cheerful, hissed every time it passed the Christmas tree. Worst of all, the angel seemed to shift its gaze whenever she looked at it, following her every movement with an intensity that made her skin crawl. As Christmas approached, her nerves grew frayed, and her sleep was plagued by nightmares. Her dreams became darker, and in each one, the angel stood closer to her, its hollow eyes filled with something she couldn't name. Desperate for answers, Emily began to research her family's past, hoping to find clues about the ornament's origins. What she found was far darker than she could have imagined. The angel had been crafted by her great-great-grandmother, who had allegedly dabbled in forbidden rituals. Legend had it that the ornament held the spirit of a lost child, bound to protect the family but cursed to remain in agony. This dark presence, Emily realized, was causing the disturbances in her home. The angel was not a guardian, it was a prisoner, and it wanted freedom. On Christmas Eve, Emily decided to perform a cleansing ritual, hoping to release the trapped spirit. She lit candles around the tree and began chanting a prayer she had found in her great-great-grandmother's journals. The house trembled as if in response, and the ornament began to crack, dark energy seeping from its surface. The angel's eyes glowed, and it whispered her name, pleading for release. With a deep breath, Emily extended her hand, and the energy surged toward her, filling the room with a blinding light. When the light faded, the angel was gone, replaced by a single white feather resting on the tree. Emily felt an immense weight lift from the room, a warmth filling the space that had been absent for days. She knew she had freed the spirit, but she also knew that her family's legacy was forever changed. That Christmas morning, they found a new ornament on the tree, a delicate glass dove, a symbol of peace. But as Emily lay down to rest, she thought she heard a faint, distant whisper, a reminder that the angel's spirit was still out there, lingering just beyond the veil. Mark Davis had recently moved into a quaint house on Elm Street, looking forward to a fresh start during the holiday season. The neighborhood was picture-perfect, with rows of homes twinkling with lights, front yards filled with inflatable Santas, reindeer, and trees draped in colorful festive decor. Mark, new to town and still unpacking, felt a strange mixture of comfort and unease as he walked through the neighborhood that first week. There was a warmth in the air, a neighborly cheer, but a single house stood dark and bare, as if untouched by time. Its shutters were cracked, paint peeling, and no lights shone through its windows. Curious, Mark had asked his realtor about it when he first toured the area. She hesitated before answering, her eyes avoiding his as she muttered, "The house next door has been empty for years, some say haunted." Mark chuckled at the idea, brushing it off as local superstition meant to scare newcomers. But on Christmas Eve, As he finished hanging his own lights, he saw something that froze him in his tracks. The house next door wasn't empty. In one of the windows on the second floor, he saw a figure, a thin, elderly man wearing a heavy coat and staring directly out into the street. His skin was pale and drawn, almost ghostly under the dim moonlight, and his expression was hollow, devoid of any warmth or recognition. Mark felt a shiver run down his spine. For a moment he considered waving or calling out, but something held him back. The man's gaze seemed locked in a void, staring through Mark as if he were looking into a memory rather than the present. Mark returned inside, trying to shake off the eerie feeling that lingered, but his mind kept circling back to the figure in the window. "I must have imagined it," he told himself, though his own voice sounded unconvincing. As the hours ticked by, sleep eluded him. He lay in bed, glancing at his window, half expecting to see a silhouette standing there in the dark. Around midnight, he was startled awake by the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow outside his house. His heart pounded as he crept to the window, pulling back the curtain. There, illuminated by the faint streetlight, was the man from next door. He stood in the middle of the street, a lantern in his hand, casting an eerie, yellowish glow. But this light was wrong. It didn't just illuminate, it seemed to absorb the warmth from the world around it. The grass under the light grew dull, and the snow took on a grey, lifeless hue, as if being drained of colour. A chill ran through Mark as he listened, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. He couldn't ignore what he had seen, nor could he dismiss the sadness that weighed heavily in Mrs. Cartwright's voice. That night, he resolved to help the restless spirit find peace, though he wasn't entirely sure how. As night fell on Christmas Eve, Mark found himself drawn to the darkened house next door. With a flashlight in one hand and a few of his family's old Christmas ornaments in the other, he approached the porch, his footsteps muffled by the snow. The front door creaked as he pushed it open, and the scent of dust and stale air filled his lungs. Stepping into the house felt like stepping back in time. The furniture was covered in sheets, and faint outlines of picture frames marked the walls where memories had once been displayed. He moved cautiously through the hall, his footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. As he reached the living room, his eyes fell on an old, faded photograph on the mantel. It was the man from the window, much younger, with a bright-eyed little girl and a beautiful woman by his side. Their faces beamed with joy, and Mark's heart ached at the sight of them, frozen in happier times. Then, as if in response to his presence, a chill swept through the room, and the faint glow of a lantern appeared in the corner. The man was there again, his eyes fixed on the photograph. Mark swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "They loved you, and they would want you to find peace." The figure looked up, his expression softening as if hearing Mark's words for the first time. Slowly, Mark set the ornaments on the mantel beside the photo. The man's gaze followed each movement, his hollow eyes filling with something close to recognition. As Mark took a step back, he saw a flicker of light behind the man, two faint silhouettes, a woman and a young girl, reaching out with warm, comforting smiles. The man turned toward them, his face brightening as he took their hands. In a moment the family was whole again, and their forms shimmered, dissolving into a gentle golden light. The house seemed to breathe, the oppressive chill lifting as warmth filled the room. The next morning, Mark returned to find the house next door completely empty. The photograph was gone, replaced by a single shimmering glass ornament hanging from the mantel. It was an angel, its face peaceful and serene. As Mark gazed at it, he felt a profound calm, knowing that the spirit of the Christmas Eve neighbor had finally found his way home. Mark hung the ornament on his own tree, a silent reminder of the neighbor he'd helped on that eerie, unforgettable Christmas Eve. And every year, he would smile when he saw it, feeling a soft warmth in his heart, a message from the man grateful, and finally at peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, be sure to subscribe for more gripping stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned and have a hauntingly memorable holiday season.